Hello and welcome to the Womb Centered Healing Podcast. I'm Sama Morningstar and I have Antje here with me today. Thanks for joining me, Antje. I'm super excited to share with you all today because Antje and I are co-creating a lovely Activate Your Creative Power series of workshops. And we've been collaborating. Antje was offering these drawing art therapy workshops in my online biomystical womb apprenticeship last year, and I just love it. And so it's a process called neurographica, and you can see, if you're watching the video, you can see a beautiful background from this process that I think that's probably one of your pieces, right, Antje? So and it's just a lovely process. I'm so looking forward to doing this series of workshops with you. And we also realized that it would be a lovely combination to do some writing from the womb processes, or some writing, do the drawing first to get those creative juices flowing, and then out of that do some writing and do this sort of co-created series of workshops. And Antje came up with a lovely structure for a series. And I'll let you share about Antje, but as those of you who've been in my programs know, it was just perfectly aligned with the kind of structures I love to use too. So Antje, would you please introduce yourself a little bit more and share a little bit more about what you're looking forward to in this process of offering this workshop?
Okay, so hello everyone. I'm Antje. I am living here in California, but I'm originally from Germany. I am an artist, and I'm proud to call myself an artist nowadays. And I teach Neurographica, or I use it in different ways. Um, and for this workshop series, I was thinking to go into a process where we connect with the four elements. We're gonna start with air, earth, fire, and water. And we actually set that up because of the moon sign, which I really think is a great idea. Um, and like my idea was to um, dive into this feeling of the elements, um, and of what each element can hold for each person in a creative way. And in a way, like my idea was to find the element in yourself and find what it wants to tell you. What is the message that it wants to give you? And I use this Neurographica drawing method because it is a way to tap into like our subconscious. So through the drawing process, we can get out of the mind and out of all these thoughts and ideas that we may have about something, and get down into a layer deeper inside and get into what do we feel about it? How does our body react to it? What kind of visions come up? And so in this workshop series, I wanted to find a way to get away from kind of trying to depict the element. That's why I really like that we start with air, because air is kind of invisible, so it's really like hard to draw. If you imagine, okay, how am I going to draw air? How am I going to like visualize it? So it's more about, what does it feel like? What color comes up for you? What movement does it have? Like for me, especially with the Neurographica, as you can probably see in the back, it's very moving, it's very fluid, it's very like, yeah, it has like this energy in it. So I would like to, um, yeah, bring out these energies through the drawing so that we can actually explore them. So it's like an explorative and very kind of experimental and very abstract way of working. So yeah, that is what I'm looking forward to.
Mm. Yeah, and when you talk about all of that, it brings up what listeners may have heard me share about before, which I find myself sharing about a lot, is this idea of the different aspects of the mind. And the we have the logical thinking brain, which makes up about 5% of our brain matter. And then we have what many people call the subconscious mind, or what those in womb centered healing circles call the feminine hind brain.
Mhm.
Okay, which includes 95% of the actual brain in your head, but then it also includes all of this brain matter in our body, which there's actually more brain matter in the belly and around the womb than there is in the head itself. So already we've got this logical thinking brain is only 5% of what's of the brain in the head. And then we've got the subconscious mind and the feminine hindbrain making up 95% of the brain matter in the brain. And then we've got more than all of that in the rest of the body, because there's the brain matter in the belly, but there's also brain matter in the heart center and the power center. All these energy centers in the body also have high concentrations of actual brain matter and neural tissue. And so when we talk about getting out of our mind and getting more into the body, we're really just accessing different parts of our um, neurological intelligence, and the intelligence that's interwoven throughout our entire being. And I feel like this artistic creative methods of relating to ourselves, like this beautiful art process that you'll be sharing with us, and the meditative writing from the womb, which is a method that came naturally for me through I was just writing about how writing itself, like if you look at some of the shapes in your drawing behind you, Antje, the viewers who are watching the video can see some of the shapes. And if you think about some of the shapes that we use when we're actually writing with a pencil and paper, not necessarily typing, but I was writing about remembering learning to write letters as a young child, and how it felt like I was learning this magical power. And there was this incredible sense of pleasure that I experienced in a very physical way, of feeling the shape of the pencil, the texture of the paper, the seeing the shape of the letters, and learning to make the shape of the letters, the sensation of the pencil sliding across the paper. I would just get lost in, I remember vividly getting lost in this process of writing the same letter over and over and over again. The shape of the letter just had so much substance to it, and sensual pleasure to it, and like this sense of magical. I was being given a magical key to self-expression. I couldn't have explained that to you back then, but I just knew this was really magical, and I was very devoted to learning how to write and handwriting and all of that. And I feel like as an educator of young children, I've learned how important that hand-eye coordination is for the development of the brain, and not just that 5% of the brain and the logical thinking mind, but the whole thing, the body, mind, brain, the whole brain, the subconscious, all of it. And so for me, writing was about being able to um, activate this magical art of verbal expression, and make a record of it, and make it beautiful. I've even explored artistic versions of writing, calligraphy approaches, and there's lots of traditions. If you look into Celtic um, lettering and things like that, where there's this elevation, or almost well, yes, definitely, not almost, definitely a reverential artistic approach to writing. And if you look at ancient books, where the people who wrote and made books were artists, and would put, extra fancy colors and gold leaf, and these books. I went to an art exhibit at one time where we were able to see some of these ancient books that were so beautifully done, and these were the priests, the monks. And even more ancient than that, the very first people that wrote were the acolytes in the temples to the goddess. That's where writing began for humans, is that in devotion to the goddess. And so the very first written words in archaeological history are hymns and poems in devotion to the goddess. And so, and it would, you would leave an acolyte who was going to become a priestess to the goddess, would leave her family behind as a young child and go and learn how to write, and would write the stories of Inanna, the goddess, over and over and over again, to learn not only the philosophies of and spiritual wisdom in the stories, but to learn this magical art of writing as well. And so there's so much power in that, and we take it for granted, right? And so I have a real passion for writing and how it connects us to our own inner narrative, our own inner wisdom. um, if we approach it from accessing this whole huge part of our brain that often gets invalidated and ignored in our lives, because we've been taught to only validate that 5% of our brain. And so I'm loving this combination of the neurographica, which is this beautiful way of accessing all this other wisdom and intelligence and sensual pleasure and awareness and sentience, and through the drawing process, and then going into the writing process from there. I'm super excited about it. So I'm really curious to hear if there's any further reflections coming up for you, hearing what I've shared, Antje.
Yeah, I love the way you describe the writing. I know that for me, the most magical thing about writing was always that I can see my own thoughts.
Mm.
And I did a lot of like just random free writing, especially when I didn't feel good. And it would always help me to just see my thoughts and like to externalize them in a way. And for me, it's almost the same with the drawing, because the idea um, of the founder of Neurographica, his idea is that every line that we draw on the paper is actually a thought. And it's a thought that we don't have words for. So it's a thought, that's like from the hindbrain. And it comes through the body. So for me, as a dancer, it's like this way of drawing is like dancing on the paper. It's like I don't try to draw something that I see. I don't try to draw something like grab something from the outside and put it on the paper, but I take something from my inside and put it on the paper. So it's really, yeah, really like, um, yeah, it's almost the same process, just like you could read what you write and you can look at what you draw. So, you got this like beautiful combination. And I also think that it's a really great combination to use the drawing and the writing together, because through the drawing, a lot of things can come up. Thoughts come up, feelings come up, emotions come up, like just sensations and like insights. Really, I always have like crazy new ideas or something when I draw, and understandings of things that I didn't really put together before, or a little detail that you didn't really know. And then to go into a writing right afterwards really brings it out to where you have this effect that you can read it and you have like yeah, kind of document about it. No, it's like documenting this uh, things that come up from the inside. Yeah, really. Yeah, I really love how you describe the beauty and the movement of the writing.
Mm.
Because yeah, yeah, definitely. I'm like a handwriter too. I don't really like to write on the computer.
Well, for me at this point, and this happens with handwriting as well, but the flow of words uh, can be so fluid and fast that typing on the computer really facilitates that flow. So, you know, when I talk about the handwriting, the sensual pleasure of the handwriting, it makes me love that as well. And I also love the flow of writing that can happen with the by typing into the computer. And that itself is like this fluttery dance of the fingers that has its own sensual components to it, like the clicking of the keys and all of that. I just love writing in whatever form that it is. And it allows for having learned how to type in high school. We actually had this is, you know, kind of showing my age here because we didn't have computers when I was going to high school. We had, I think our typewriters were electric in the typing class that I took. So we had actual electric typewriters, and I learned to type on electric typewriters. And so, like,
That's really cool.
yeah, um, and in high school, right? And not everybody had typing lessons in high school, but a lot of people had to learn how to type and maybe had to, you know, take an online typing course or something like that at some point or another. But if someone hasn't learned how to type, um, it might be not as fluid to flow with typing on the computer. Um, but for me, since I did learn how to type and I can type a certain number of words per minute, not super high, but you know, I can flow with it. That's a skill I'm very grateful for too. And I still remember to this day the sensual thing of the electric typewriter is very different than on the computer
Mhm.
because you really have to activate those fingers because the buttons are a little bit harder to push. And I even had a period of time when I got into manual typewriters, not electric, like the old fashioned antique kinds. And I would go to thrift stores and I got myself an old Royal typewriter and I made sure it was working properly. And I actually had a group of friends and we published, and I published several poetry books on my own using that manual typewriter, where I would type out all the poems and make a draft copy. And then I would take it down to Kinko's, the photocopy shop, and I'd organize the book myself and make photocopies of it. And then I folded it and strung it together and on 100% recycled paper. And I reused old manila file folders because I was working at a tax preparer's office at the time and she was totally analog. She didn't use computers or anything back then. And so she had all of her clients' files in file cabinets with paper files in manila file folders, and she'd have me organize the file cabinets, and I would take out all the old manila folders and create new files, you know, and you know, and so I would take those home and I used those to make the covers of my poetry books that were typed on the manual typewriter. I think there's some like terms for people who are like savoring older technology even as newer technology is taking over, you know. So I was kind of one of those people who was like, let's stick with the non-electric, you know, the manual things. And I tied up the books with string and like that. So, and then I sold those books in the local news shop, newsprint newspaper shop, newsstand. Like we had a little newsstand where you'd actually buy newspapers.
I think that still exists though.
What's that?
In some places. That still exists though in some
It
places.
does. It does still exist, but I mean, I don't have one. There's not a shop
Right.
like that in the town I live in
Oh,
now. In
sure.
fact, I think even in that town I lived in then, there's not a shop like that anymore, and they're more and more rare. But I think you know, yeah. And in Europe, I think it was more common to have like a little newsstand booth.
Yeah.
And in certain, probably in certain larger cities. And, but anyway, yeah, the whole sensual creative process of putting our thoughts on paper. and and I've also made homemade paper for those book covers. So you know, as we're talking about this, you know, I'm feeling like I keep having this fantasy that I'm going to make my own homemade paper and make it nice and smooth and do neurographica on one side and then write the writing on the other side or something like that. But we'll see. That it's quite a process, the homemade paper.
Right.
Uh-huh.
Well, that's an interesting idea. I like that. I wanted to ask you, I remember you brought up the idea to do the elements according to the moons.
Hmm.
Uh, how did you like, yeah, why do you think that is a good idea or important?
Well, um, I've been gardening with the moon for quite a long time, and I got into that when I back when I was studying biodynamics, and I was studying to become a Waldorf teacher, and I was learning about biodynamic gardening. And there's been extensive research that demonstrates that when we garden and do tasks in the garden that are supported by certain moon sign qualities. So, what we mean by the moon sign is that the moon is traveling through the signs of the zodiac, just like the sun does, and just like the other planets do. And that's why you say, my sun sign, for example, is Sagittarius, because when I was born, the sun was in that sign from the perspective of where I was born on the surface of the planet Earth. So if I was looking up to the sky from Newport Beach, California, on the day that I was born, I could see, if I knew how to do that as an infant, which I didn't, but we have charts and you know, astrology charts that tell us that on that day, at that time, from that perspective, the sun was in the sign, the zodiac sign of Sagittarius. And you might also know where the moon was on the day that you were born. And the quality, each of the signs have different qualities based on, and there's a group of signs that are considered to be have certain elemental qualities: earth, air, fire, and water. So there's a group of signs that are considered to be earth signs that have that quality of earthiness. There's a group of signs that are considered to be air signs that have that quality of air, and so on and so forth. And so since I've been doing that gardening for many years, it comes very natural to me to organize my business activities, my creative activities around the moon signs, especially ones like this where we're zoning in on the qualities of the elements. We can support our awareness of those elements by getting in sync with where the moon is, because you know, the moon has a powerful effect on our bodies and on our the way our fluids flow, the way our energy flows. And so when the moon is in a particular sign that has a particular elemental influence, that's like a filter on the camera that makes the picture look a certain color or have a certain quality. And so it enhances our sensitivity and our awareness of that particular element. And we could totally geek out on which sign is the moon in, and so what aspect of the qualities of that element and that sign are going to be there. But and that's great and that's fun, and we can do that. And you know, I love geeking out on astrology, but it doesn't matter if we do that or not, the effects are still there. And we can still feel we can still just invite that that effect. And you know, I wasn't aware or as devoted to this practice before I started learning about um, the power of biodynamic working with the moon signs with your gardening. And there's been some extensive research where people will plant seeds of a certain type throughout all of the different moon signs, and then notice that, well, if you plant it in this moon sign and then you plant it again in this moon sign, and this second moon sign is more favorable for seeds to sprout and grow, the ones that you planted in the sign that wasn't favorable for that will actually wait to sprout and grow until the favorable moon sign comes. So you're not getting a jump on growth. You're actually, delaying it. And actually, if while they're sitting there not having the favorable moon sign, some of them are getting rotten and being eaten by bugs and things like that. So you're better off saving your seeds. And the same with transplanting plants that are already established. There's certain moon signs that are very favorable for that process, so that it's less stressful for the plant to be dug up and transplanted, and where that it really stimulates new root growth and the plant being well established. Whereas if you do the transplant in a different sign that's not favorable to that, then there's more likely that something will go wrong or not so favorably in that process. So it's so clear with the plants. And I'm sure there's research about our emotional state, our creative state, and all of that. Or maybe I'm not so sure there's research about that, but there ought to be.
Yeah.
And I think we all kind of have an inner sense about that too. So I've been organizing my online courses that do things with the elements around the signs of the moon for quite some time. So it was just a natural thing to say, well, oh, you want to do the elements? Well, let's do it. What order do we do it in? Let's do it by what sign the moon is in on that week, when we're in that week, on that day when we're doing that workshop.
Yeah, that's great. I'm glad that you did that because it makes so much sense to me now that when the moon, I mean, we could basically, our workshop series can be a research now, because we will go from one element to the next and go through the same, not the same, but the same idea of a creative process, and we will most likely see differences between the different days when we work with the different elements. So I feel like it's the perfect combination, when we want to dive into the element in ourselves and see like where, like how we are personally influenced by it, then our sensitivity to it should be much higher when it's actually the moon sign as well. I
Mhm.
feel that is, yeah, great. I'm glad I asked you that question. Like for me, it makes much more sense now. I really liked the idea before. I'm not very big in astrology, just a little bit. I used to have a friend. I used to live with a girl that was 100% intuitive. She would know the zodiac sign of everyone that she met right away.
Mm.
Like she met so many of my friends, and she would ask me afterward, "Is he a Pisces?" And I would be like, "I don't even know. I have to ask him." And like literally, I asked all my friends, and every time she met someone new, I would be like, "So." Ask her the question, and she would like be 100% right. She was
Wow.
never wrong. It was like the most amazing thing to me. So that's like uh, how it became interesting to me personally, just because I found that really like impressive and I couldn't really understand it. And she would go about it like that. She would be like, "Oh, this person feels very watery." She would first of all point out the element and would go straight to that, and then there would be like the three different signs that are in the element, and one is a little bit more like this, one's a little bit more like this, and literally she pointed out like 100% right. So I think, yeah, I mean, for me personally, there's definitely something in that. And also with the gardening, my husband's actually doing is like getting into the biodynamic gardening, which is interesting too that you mentioned it. And he's like he's actually writing down things like when he does the seeds, just to know it afterwards and to really do his own research. So yeah, I feel like our workshop series can be a creative research, really, you know, about like which sign, for example, are you most creative in? Like which one, you know, it's gonna flow the easiest, which one is gonna be where your words come out like crazy, or where your colors are different, or where, you know, your lines are different. So it would be very interesting to see afterwards, like if we feel and see any differences.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
Yeah, beautiful.
Love.
Well, I'm so looking forward to these workshops together. They're coming up. The first one is Sunday, February 28th. Okay. So we're going to put the link in the show notes of this podcast. So whether you're looking at this on YouTube or whether you're looking at it through an audio podcast platform, look for the show notes and find the link to sign up. You can also go directly to Eventbrite and look up the Womb Centered Healing Temple on Eventbrite, and you'll find that the organization of Womb Centered Healing Temple there, and you'll see it should show you the all the different events that are available, including this one. And there you can sign up, and it's a donation-based event, so you can make a donation and join us for this series of workshops. It's going to be 4 workshops, if I remember correctly. You can sign up for one, or you can sign up for more than one, or you can sign up for all 4. It'll ask you for a separate donation for each one that you sign up for, so keep that in mind. Yeah, we're looking forward to seeing you there. They'll be taking place on Zoom. So you'll receive a Zoom link. You'll receive like there, once you sign up through Eventbrite, you will get an email that gives you a link to an event page. And on that event page, if you scroll down, it'll give you the Zoom link. It'll also have a video screen for you to click on at the time of the call, and it'll take you directly there. Some people get a little bit confused about the way they have their event pages, but just if you just scroll down and explore the page, you'll find everything that you need through that link that you get in the email. So um, yeah, anything else you want to add about the workshop logistically, or anything else?
Mm, You need a piece of paper and some pens and colored pencils. I prefer to use colored pencils, but anything that you have works. Any type of colors. Yeah, and I use just letter size paper, just normal paper. Doesn't have to be anything fancy. Of course, you can also bring out your watercolor paper and your special colors if you feel like it. That like everything is possible with that. And the process is really free, so you're gonna find your own way through it. I'm always amazed how extremely different every single picture of every single person that I've ever worked with looked. No matter if I structured the process really, really strict and I really told them what to draw, or if I just made it very open. So yeah, I'm excited and I'm looking forward to it.
Mhm.
And
And I will share that we have uh, this sense to recommend using no bigger than an 8.5 by 11 size paper. I've I have big art pads that are much bigger than that, and I find doing some of these workshops with Antje with this writing process is that it takes a lot more time to do the process on a bigger piece of paper. And since our time is we each workshop is 2 hours, and we're doing not only drawing, but we're also doing writing. We don't, we're going to have time to do the process on an 8.5 by 11-inch paper, but not on a paper that's bigger than that. And because there is a sort of a process of filling the whole page that's included in the drawing process. Um, so that's to, so I'm gonna try and come with that smaller paper for this, for my drawing process, because I in the previous ones I've done, I'm still on the last part, on the previous part, while Anjay's moving on to the next part, because I brought such a big paper. So just to consider that, and then yeah, so that's what I'll add to that. Anything else before we sign
Yeah,
off?
that's great. Thank you for mentioning that.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Well, thanks for coming on here and sharing about this. I'll also share a link. Anje wrote a very lovely blog post about her journey of accepting or claiming herself as an artist. Um, and that's a real interesting story. That's something we can mention too, is that um, I feel it's important that we reclaim our creative artistry, because it has for many of us been stolen from us with these ideas that only a certain type of artistic expression is considered good enough to be considered artist worthy or art worthy or something like that, and that there's this hierarchical structure around our creative process that just shuts a lot of it down. um, and so this a big part of this workshop is to reactivate our creative power and reclaim it as something that's intrinsically ours and unique, and that no external system of judgment or hierarchical criticism or evaluation has any say over. That we can claim it for ourselves, and just toss those rules of what's good and what's bad completely out the window, and say no thank you to that system that is designed to rob the majority of people from this intrinsic gift of artistic expression that we all have the right to benefit from. So that's my little spiel about that. So I'll put the link to Anjay's blog post about that, so you can explore that more as well. And I should be writing a blog post too. We'll see if the link to mine gets in there as well. But if you subscribe on the Womb Centered Healing Temple uh, website, if you subscribe to the newsletter, you'll be notified when my blog post comes out as well. And as well as future podcast episodes and other blog posts and things for future events. So that's all for now. Until next time, thanks a lot, everyone. See you soon.